Yo, what is up guys, and welcome to another Wild Rift video. And in today's video I'm going to be giving you guys an updated tier list for every single role in the game. As you can see, I'm still not at home. I'm currently in Singapore because I'm casting the icons, worlds for Wild Rift. Sorry for not uploading a lot of videos. I hope you guys understand that I am a bit busy casting. Don't worry, I'll resume the videos when I'm at home. So, first of all, before getting into this video, a quick word from the video sponsor. This video is sponsored by wildstats.gg, and this website is awesome. It has everything you need regarding Wild Rift. So one thing that it has right here is the leaderboards for Europe, and you can see who's on the leaderboards. And another thing that I really love about this is you see that the thing right there, the swords. What that essentially means is that they have a history. Like, look, battle stats available. If I click on this player, Xuvin, for example, you can see exactly what he played. As you can see, 1 hour ago. So this guy played Caitlyn with a Muramana and a Duskblade. And what? Okay. Well, he's winning everything, as you can see. He's literally winning everything. What? But how does he play it? But see, like, you can see these crazy things right here. Another thing that I want to show you guys, and this may be me just flexing, who knows? Look at this right here. Look at how many games I won. I keep going up, 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 up. And look at this. Look at right here. This final push right here in the 1000 LP. I have 1000 LP right now, and I am indeed going to be challenger tonight. And you can see my history as well. As you can see, I am working on a Fiora video. I'm winning a lot, and the losses that I'm losing is, SVP loses every single loss. But I'm doing pretty good here, as you can see. You can, like, I've turned on my battle history. You can always view it. Check all of this out yourself. You can use my link in the description. So let's get into the video. There's timestamps in the description if you just want to see the tier list. But I'm gonna talk about them, right? So first of all, we got Baron lane. By the way, they're like, the mid lane one is crazy. There's one champion who's one of my favorite champions who made it up very far. You want to see it. So, we got Fiora first. Do you guys remember when Fiora got buffed? I predicted that she would be broken. I put her all the way up in the S+ tier, and I was like, she's gonna be broken. Because they buffed the base damage on her first ability, and they buffed her passive again. And they buffed her health. Like, she has more health now at level 1. So, Fiora is broken, but in the right draft. I won't get into too many details right now because I'll make a full Fiora video, but basically pick her into melees. If you pick her into melees, she's absolutely broken. Like, you'll win your lane easily. Late game, you'll win every single 1v1. She is crazy strong right now. Another champion that is crazy strong right now is Riven. And Riven works very differently from Fiora because Riven doesn't win early game as well, but Riven is like a team fight carry. You just gotta farm up well, and then in the mid-late game, you can absolutely hard carry teamfights like crazy, which is a thing that Fiora can't really do. So each champion has their own strengths, and these two champions are definitely the queens of the Baron. I should give her a star as well, because they are the obvious queens. Next up, we got a little king as well, who's Sett. The good thing about Sett is his engages in teamfights are incredible. With the ultimate, and then the third ability to stun everyone, and then the second ability as well to tank up damage and deal damage. He's really strong. The only problem is, like, he doesn't hard carry like some of the other Baron laners, so it could be a bit of a struggle in solo queue, because if you have an absolute garbage team, it really doesn't matter how well you engage, because your team kind of has to do the damage. But I mean, I'm not saying Sett cannot do damage, because obviously he can, but it's not like you can easily hard carry the game, like, Darius, Fiora, Riven, these types of champions. Next up, we got Wukong, and the thing about Wukong is the changes made him so powerful in the Baron lane. Not necessarily S+ tier, but definitely on top of the S tier. Like, he can do really well on the Baron lane. He can trade with a lot of Baron laners now, and win the trade, because they buffed his first ability. The healing, they buffed the healing, the damage, and everything. And it just works really well for him. Like, you can trade so easily, just use your first ability, and you're gonna heal up so much and deal a lot of damage to the enemy. Like, it's really a no-brainer, and it works. And then when you get to teamfights as well, of course, Wukong is incredibly powerful with that really, really good ultimate of his. Next up is Renekton, and the thing about Renekton is, he's strong. We all know what Renekton can do in the early game, right? He can cheese the enemy and get a free kill. But late game Renekton is really not that strong. He loses a lot of 1v1s. Like, Fiora destroys Renekton in 1v1. Darius does really well to Renekton in 1v1. And then in teamfights, he doesn't do that well either. I'm talking about late game right now. But mid game Renekton is very strong. But so early mid game Renekton is what makes him top of S tier. But late game Renekton is what keeps him away from S+ tier. Next up we got Darius, and even though he got nerfed so much, he's still good, because level 1 Darius is still very powerful. You can hit your first ability and outtrade the enemy very easily. And then late game Darius is also still very powerful. It's just mid game Darius that kinda struggles with attack speed, because during team fights you may struggle getting up your stacks, as opposed to the old Darius. But it's still fine, like he's still very strong. If you can reset your ultimate, he's still the same old Darius, so he's still very, very powerful. Garen, I'm not gonna talk about Garen, because it's Garen. I mean, what is there to talk about Garen? It's just Garen, right? It's just a tank, does so much damage, stupid ultimate, the silence, Garen, basically. Next up we got Malphite, who is actually an interesting champion. So Malphite is very strong tank in lane. He does well into like any matchup, really. And then if you get ahead, you can destroy your enemy laner. Like, that's the one thing about Malphite. And even if you're behind, you can still build full tank and be a formidable tank for your team. Like a really big, nice tank that the enemies just can't kill. And the new Iceborne Gauntlet as well really, really perfectly complements the kit that Malphite has, because it gives a lot of HP, a lot of armor, a lot of mana, everything. And of course that big damage after you use your abilities. So as a Malphite, you can just stand in the middle of the enemy, slow all of them constantly, and tank up all the damage. Next up is Gragas, and the thing about Gragas is nothing changed except for his ultimate, but that is a pretty big change. Because they made his ultimate slower now, so it's not a free hit anymore. You guys know how Gragas' ultimate used to be a free hit, right? Where you just push an enemy into your team and get a free kill. That doesn't happen as easily anymore now, because it's much slower and the enemies have much more time to dodge it, maneuver around it. So it's going to be much harder to get a catch on the enemy with your ultimate now. However, Gragas is still, the rest of Gragas is still the same old Gragas. Full AP Gragas still absolutely one-shots the enemy in the late game. Tank Gragas is still very tanky in the late game, so it's still kind of the same old Gragas besides the ultimate. About Shen, if this was a competitive tier list, Shen would be S+ tier. But it's not. This is a solo queue tier list. So Shen is really, really good, especially because you can split push and then you can ult towards your team whenever they're team fighting. But you gotta rely on one of your teammates to go in. Because that's the power of Shen. You make your teammates super tanky because you give a lot of barrier. And then you can taunt all of the enemies and do your thing as a Shen, right? But if your team is afraid, they're constantly not engaging, and you know, they're letting the enemies engage, that's when Shen sucks a lot. So you kind of rely on your team, which is why I don't really like Shen in solo queue. Next up is Nasus. I love a Nasus. Nasus is super powerful right now. Yet again, you kind of have to, well, it's not really relying on your team, it's just you have to hope that your team doesn't int and surrender the game, because Nasus playstyle requires you to annoy your team. As in, you just gotta stay in your team, you don't care at all about your teammates, and you just farm up, you do your thing as a Nasus, right? Because those are Nasus things, but your team kinda has to understand that. In high elo, I found that people do understand it a bit more than lower elo. It's not like that I play a lot of lower elo, but I heard from a lot of players like, Hells, you told me to play Nasus, but people keep flaming me. And that's the problem with Nasus, right? You have to be able to deal with that. You have to be able to talk with your teammates and tell them, hey guys, I'm not going to rotate to the first dragon because I'm Nasus. You know, I need to farm and I'll be fine late game. So communication is key when you play Nasus. Next up is Camille. Camille got nerfed hard. Like, early game Camille sucks. Late game Camille is still very powerful, but basically Camille before level 9 is quite weak. And you have a really hard time in your lane, like winning trades. Like, sure, you can still go even, but you can't really win lane too easily. Unless you're much, much better than the enemy Baron laner. But like, if the enemy Baron laner, for example, plays a Renekton, you're gonna get destroyed in the early game as a Camille. So that's the thing, you know, you have to be able to play properly. You have to play around your passive. You have to play it passively and get to the late game with Camille. Then she's still gonna be super good. From now on, I'm not gonna talk about every champion. I'm just gonna talk about the ones that I want to talk about. Singed is very good. It's just like there's a lot of matchups that destroy Singed. Like, Nasus, Gragas, Darius, Renekton, Wukong. So there's a lot of matchups in the Baron lane that Singed doesn't do well against, but late game Singed is like super broken. But you want to play him in the mid lane. He's not really the best in the... I mean, to be fair, he's not even S tier. Like, I would actually put him here. Yeah, this is a better place for Singed, to be honest, in the Baron lane. Like, he's really not that good in the Baron lane. Next one I want to talk about is Echo, who's also not supposed to be good in the Baron lane, but Echo is so broken in the current patch that he even works in the Baron lane. It's crazy, right? Like, he's not supposed to work in the Baron lane, but he's so good that he still works in the Baron lane. Next up is Jax, and this used to be one of the best Baron lanes in the game, but they nerfed him so hard. So now he loses a lot of matchups because his attack speed got nerfed and all of his other stats. So he's just, you know, late game he's insane, but early game you'll get destroyed in the Baron lane. Next up we got Graves, who is good in the Baron lane. Yet again, you know, late game very strong. He struggles a little more now because they did nerf a few parts about him, but he's still very solid in the Baron lane. Next up is Jace. To be fair, I don't really play a lot of Jace, but I just see a lot of Jace players, and I realize, like, Jace is strong. Early mid-game, Jace is incredibly powerful, and even in the late game, like, you can tank for your team pretty well. You still have decent poke. It's not amazing, because, like, they did nerf Jace, and it did hurt him quite a lot, but he's very strong in the lane. Like, he does very, very well into any matchup, really. Next up, we got Mundo, who is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated champions in the game right now. I will make a full Mundo video very soon, so keep your eyes out on that one, because that one is going to be a banger. I'll show you guys how to play Mundo. I've done it multiple times, but I still don't see a lot of Mundo players on the server. I want to change that, because Mundo is super strong. You just got to play him correctly. Next up, I want to talk about Kennen. Another champion that's quite underrated, but you have to pick him in the right composition, right? Like, if you pick him in the right composition, he has certain Baron laners that he beats out very easily. So you can get ahead and then destroy the enemy with your ultimate. But again, I'll probably make a Kennen video very soon to explain all of that to you. Let's now move on to the jungle. So, Lee Sin. Lee Sin is still at top of the jungle tier list. Wow, woohoo, who would have guessed? So the one weakness that Lee Sin has is he can't carry late game. But he's so incredibly powerful in the early game that it doesn't really matter, because you'll get your teammates ahead so much that you just can't lose anymore. Like, all they have to do is just click on their attack buttons and you'll win the game. That's the thing with Lee Sin. Like, his ganking is so good. It's unbelievable. His early game fighting is so good. So you have to use that. You have to play him aggressively, and you just win the game then, right? Unless your team is trash and can't carry the late game, that's the risk you're taking with Lee Sin. Kha'Zix next, on the other hand, is different. Kha'Zix can carry the game. If you're snowballing with Kha'Zix, ooh, the enemy will hate their lives, because you'll pretty much two-shot any one of them, and you'll even one-shot the squishies. His first ability does so much isolated damage, and his ultimate is so good as well to reposition yourself, to surprise the enemy, you know, to apply his passive every time. He's just so powerful, right? Like, you just have to know how to play him. I have a lot of Kha'Zix videos on my YouTube channel. The most important thing with this champion is just knowing how to initiate a team fight, because you shouldn't be the tank, you shouldn't be the guy going in. Your team has to go in, and you gotta catch out the isolated targets, and then he's insane. Jungle Wukong, incredibly strong as well with the new changes. Really, really, really powerful. Just the downtime on his ultimate is so good, because you can knock up the enemy so fast. Yet again, the first ability deals so much damage. Just the overall buffs that he got make him so strong. Like, he's so powerful in the jungle right now. Next up, we got Morgana, who's the fastest jungle clearer in the game. She takes a little bit of time to skill into the late. Well, she actually takes a lot of time to skill into the late game, but her ganking is good. Her jungle clear is the best in the game. Her catching out potential is good. It's just like, if you have an actual proper fight, she may struggle a little bit up until the very late game. But you have to play around that, right? You don't want to fight skirmishes. You just want to catch out enemies. You want to gank enemies, and you want to farm. And when you get to the late game, you want to team fight. That's the thing with Morgana. Next up is Olaf, and Olaf is still Olaf. You know, with an enchanter, it's so incredibly powerful. Like, you just go in, get buffed by your enchanter, and win the game, right? Like, that's the thing with Olaf. In the late game, he does struggle, though, and he actually struggles against high damage per second champions, like the Lucian, for example, like the Corkis. You know, he really struggles against those that can run away from him and do a lot of damage. So you do have to pick him in a bit of a good draft, but there's not a lot of champions that can deal with Olaf very easily like those. Next up is Xin Zhao, and Xin Zhao is really powerful too. His early game is so strong, like, so strong. He can even beat out Lee Sin. That's how strong his early game is. Then in the late game, his 1v1 is really good. He's also a pretty decent tank in the late game, but he does fall off in the late game, because his damage falls off pretty massively in the late game. So that's the one thing you have to be careful of. He does struggle in late game teamfights, but his early game is so unbelievably powerful. And his mid game as well, like, he's strong. He's S+ tier. Next up, we got Echo. Not quite S+ tier, but S tier in the jungle. His jungle clear is really fast. You can skill pretty easily in the late game, but ganking with Echo is hard. Like, I would only say in the skilled hands, Echo would be S+ tier. But like in the really skilled hands, because it's just so hard to gank properly, because you gotta use your second ability to stun the enemy, and it's just not easy to do. That's the thing. So that's my one thing with Echo. Next up is Evelynn. She got nerfed again. Still very strong, however. Top of the S tier. Like, her invisibility, her ganking, her ultimate, her late game one-shotting potential is still incredible. So she still feels the same basically, but she never gets banned anymore. That's the thing, right? Like, she got nerfed. People think she's trash, so they don't really ban her anymore, but you can still abuse Evelynn. She's still very, very powerful. Next up, we got Graves in the jungle. Still strong, right? Like, they nerfed his jungle clear, but it's still strong. you're only gonna take a few more seconds to clear the jungle now, but his late game is still incredible. His ganking is decent. His skirmishing is very strong. Like the 2v2s, the 1v1s in the jungle, he's very, very strong at. So that's the power of Graves, and you can use that in your favor. Next up, we got Nunu, who's a very good mix of a tank and AP damage. And the buffs that he got are very, very great. You know, you can secure every objective with Nunu. It's so easy with his abilities. His late game is great because he's such a good tank for his team. And then his CC is so good. Like, you can stun all of, or you can root all of the enemies. You can also slow all of them with your ultimate. It's just such a good champion to have during team fights. Next up we got Riven, who's really good in the jungle too. Her ganking is not the best, but her team fighting is so amazing. You know, when you can just get to level 5, when you have that ultimate, her team fighting is incredible. Her 1v1ing is also pretty good. It's just her ganking that sucks a little bit, but it's okay. Like, you can carry games yourself when you play Riven jungle. Next up we got Aurelia. In the skilled hands, Aurelia is broken. She did get nerfed in the jungle. Her jungle clear is a little bit slower now, but it's still Aurelia. Like, she's very good. Her ganking is not as good, but yet again, late game Aurelia, even mid game Aurelia, team fighting, her ultimate are all just so powerful. Jax in the jungle as well, very, very strong. You can farm up. Yet again, like, he got nerfed so often, but he's still good. If you can just farm up, get to that late game, it's still a late game Jax. With that ultimate, you can tank up everything. The third ability to stun enemy, it's just really good champion. Jax is a really strong champion. Diana jungle is also very good, and I'm finally pronouncing her name correctly. I always used to say Diana, but it's Diana. I learned that here because I'm casting, so the casters told me, hey, it's Diana, not Diana, it's Diana. So I'm working on it. Next up we got Vi. You know, solid, like solid. The thing about Vi is, she feels unkillable when she reaches the late game, somehow, some way. Like, when you reach late game with Vi, you get a Sterix Gauge and a Guardian Angel. She feels absolutely unkillable. She's such a strong tank, and she can catch out anyone with her ultimate. So it's a very, very good champion to have, even in the late game. Her ganking is one of the best in the game. It's just during mid-game team fights, late-game team fights, she doesn't really do that much damage because she's a single-target damage champion, as opposed to some of the other champions, right? Who do I want to talk about? Pantheon. You know, Pantheon is great. His ganking is great. It's like Lee Sin, basically. Your early game is really, really good, but he is absolutely useless in the late game. But Lee Sin is less useless in the late game than Pantheon, because at least Lee Sin has his ultimate, which is a great late game ability. So Lee Sin has one ability that's good in the late game. Pantheon is just absolutely useless in the late game. So you really are just reliant on setting up your team to carry in the late game. And that's the problem. I don't really like that about Pantheon, you know, because I want to be able to carry the game myself in the late game. Next up, Rengar. Rengar feels so weak now. Like, his AD nerf just, I don't know. He just feels so. I'm not that weak though. I mean, it's like here, somewhere here. Yeah, on top of the B tier. So like, Rengar feels so weak now with that nerf. He already felt like, I'm not sure why people played him so much in competitive. In solo queue, he already felt kinda meh, and now it's even worse. So like, his early game is so weak. You really gotta get kills to scale up with Rengar now. Otherwise, you'll just be so behind, and you'll constantly get killed over and over again. Shyvana as well, like, when they changed the dragons to spawn at 5 minutes, it's an indirect nerf to Shyvana, because a lot of games are only gonna have 3 dragons instead of 4 dragons. So Shyvana is not gonna have much opportunity to get dragons anymore, as opposed to before, where there was always 4 dragons. Now it's, you know, only 3 dragons. Basically 2 dragons up until the Elder Dragon. So Shyvana's just not getting many buffs like before anymore. Let's see. On to the mid lane. And here is where it gets interesting. Here's where it gets... Let me just sip my water real quick. How about we just skip everyone and talk about Veigar immediately? Because my boy Veigar made it on the tier list in the mid lane. What the hell is Veigar doing in the S+ tier? Let me explain. In solo queue, for some reason, no one understands how to deal with a Veigar. They'll always get caught by you, and they'll always give you stacks to skill into the late game, and when you get late game Veigar, the game is over. You'll just carry the game. I'm not sure if I made a Veigar video, but I have a Veigar video ready, which I'm gonna make very soon. I'm a really good Veigar player. If you haven't watched all of my Veigar videos yet, I really recommend you to do it. And I'm making new ones as well. This champion is absolutely busted right now. They reduced the cooldown of his first ability. They increased the stun duration, or sorry, they reduced the cooldown of his third ability too before as well, and they increased the stun duration of his third ability. It's insane. It's insane how strong he is right now. Like, the third ability in the late game, when enemies walk into it, they're dead. Like, they're just dead, because you can do second ability, first ability, ultimate, boom, dead. That's the beauty of Veigar. Like, You essentially get one free kill every single team fight, unless somehow, some way the enemies can avoid your third ability altogether. The one thing with Veigar is you gotta get to the late game. You just gotta know how to play him. Again, I made a lot of Veigar videos already, and I'm making a new one as well. You have to know how to play him, skill into the late game safely, and you just win the game. So now let's start at the actual tier list. Diana. Diana, S+ tier, right? So powerful. I have a Diana video ready for you guys as well. Like, I have so many videos ready. I just haven't recorded them yet because unfortunately I didn't have much time here while I'm at the hotel because I'm casting so much. I'm chilling with the casters. So I'm so sorry, guys. But don't worry. Hells is not retired from YouTube. I'm going to be back all the way. Don't worry. Don't worry, guys. Diana is just so powerful. You know, early game she trades for well in lane. Late game her team fighting is insane. She just has no real weakness. She has no weakness. Like, there's no counters to Diana right now. Irelia, I don't want to talk about Irelia. Echo in the mid lane, insane. Insane. His wave clear is so good. He can counter out Ares, for example, by just pushing the wave as well. So no one is going to get an advantage over Echo early game because he can push waves very easily. And the thing is, he can skill to the late game, and then you guys know how good Echo late game is, right? And Akshan is also one of the champs that I want to talk about. I put him in the S+ tier, and that's mainly because of his passive. And then also just how good he is. He just feels so strong, like... His third ability is so good to reposition yourself. His double basic attack does so much damage. His movement speed that he gets constantly from his basic attacks and his first ability feels so strong as well. It's just, he feels like an overall very, very solid champion. And also, like, 1v1s he's very good at. And the ultimate too, like to finish off enemies or to deal damage for free from a long distance. Like, he just feels very, very solid right now to me. Next up we got Ziggs. And I would put Ziggs in S+ tier, but in solo queue he feels like S tier because... you do have to skill into the late game. You have a free lane, but ganking as Ziggs is gonna be hard because, like, when you're playing Ziggs and your teammate is ganking you, you don't really have much CC to stun the enemy like other champions. So that's the one thing about Ziggs. But skill into the late game and you just carry the game for free. Next up is Twisted Fate. Really, really good. His ganking is unrivaled. Like, he has the best ganking in the game. His late game is insanely powerful. It's just his early game that's perhaps a bit weak. Like, you don't really do a lot of damage early game. Sure, your stun is pretty good, but you just don't do that much damage. But when you ramp up your Rod of Ages, when you get to that later game stage, when you get to Rabadon's Death Cap, you'll deal insane damage and you'll have insane CC. And that's the beauty of Twisted Fate. And also the Rapid Fire Cannon to catch out enemies from a really long distance. Like, that's what Twisted Fate is really good at. So you gotta reach the late game, you gotta gank your teammates. If you don't do that, he's trash. Next up is Yasuo. Yasuo feels very strong, you know, with the Solari Charge Blade, with the Wit's End, with the Blade of the Rune Kings. All the items just fit so well with Yasuo. And then also, because Wukong got buffed, it indirectly buffed Yasuo as well. And because Malphite got buffed indirectly, it also indirectly buffs Yasuo. Because you gotta pick Yasuo with one of those champions, and it's insane, right? Because you have so many knockups, and you can follow up with your ultimate as well. Katarina is Katarina. Same story as Irelia. The great Katarina players are still gonna be able to abuse the hell out of her. So be on the lookout for her. Next up is Singed. Feels very, very strong. Like, Singed, but you only want to pick him against melee champions like the Katarina, Yasuo, Diana, Echo, Irelia. Only melee champions. Don't pick Singed into ranged champions because you're gonna struggle. Like, if you pick Singed into if you pick him into Veigar, Orianna, Akshan, Brand, Ahri, whatever, you'll struggle really hard in lane because you're gonna get outpushed, you're gonna get out damaged, and you're not gonna be able to get ganks for free. Because the beauty of Singed in the mid lane is you can just get a Proto Belt. If you're up against a melee champion, Proto Belt to that melee champion, use your second ability and throw them into it, root them, and then your jungler can gank them for free. That's the beauty of Singed. It's a pretty high skilled champion, but he's really good in the lane. But the reason that I put him in the middle of the S tier, not in the S+ tier anymore, is because I realized there's a lot of ranged champions that are like broken in the mid lane now, so Singed doesn't really fit into that very well. Next up, we got Karma that I want to talk about. Karma is just strong. You just go Luden's Echo, Rabadon's Death Cap, she deals so much damage. Her shielding is very good, and she's just solid overall, like just a solid champion. The next that I want to talk about is going to be Zed. I put him on top of the A tier. Maybe I should have put him... You know what? Let's put him in the bottom S tier, actually, because he does feel strong. Like, the ultimate cooldown is just so low for Zed. And even though they've nerfed Zed quite a bit, he still feels very solid. Like, you can just constantly spam your ultimate in the late game. Early game, he's good at ganking, and he's just strong in general. It's just during team fights he's gonna struggle because, yeah, you know, enemies will get stasis enchant, they'll use their flash. But if you know how to play him, if you constantly skirmish in the late game, constantly use your ultimate to bait out abilities or get kills, that's where Zed is super powerful. Next up is Annie, who is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated champions in the game, because she did get nerfed, but she's still insanely powerful. So, Annie is just very solid in my opinion. Her ganking is very good, and her late game is like unrivaled. Her late game is so damn powerful. Who else do I want to talk about? Fizz, I don't really like Fizz too much. Sure, he can do stuff, but it feels like he really doesn't fit in this current meta. Because, like, for example, Echo absolutely hard counters Fizz, right? Because of his ultimate. Diana does well into Fizz because of her second ability. Aurelia does really well into Fizz because of her second ability. You know what I mean? So, and like, Fizz just doesn't work into the current good champions. That's why he's sitting in the bottom, or he's sitting a bit in the bottom of the tier list. Who do I want to talk about? Aurelion Sol. I put him in the B tier, but like the good Aurelion Sol players will have him be like top of the A tier, maybe even S tier. But this is only the Aurelion Sol one tricks. In the normal hands, he's like so trash. Alright. On to the Dragon Lane, and here it gets interesting as well. So, solo queue. Keep in mind this is solo queue. Number 1, Jinx. Jinx in solo queue is broken. Because no one knows how to deal with a good Jinx. And I have a million Jinx videos. I am insanely good at Jinx. Like, this is one of my best champions as well. So I really recommend you to watch it. Jinx is basically free wins. Like, literally free wins. Especially when you have an Enchanter support. Like, it's free wins if you just know how to play her. Her rockets do so much damage. Lethal tempo with her passive as well when you use the minigun is insane. The attack speed is crazy. Like, you'll be able to do like 3 or 4 attacks per second. Crazy, just crazy damage. Her late game is insane. You have to be able to play her correctly. Next up we got Lucian, who feels very powerful as well with the Storm Razor, with the Solari Charge Blade. I made a Lucian video recently. I made a Lucian video recently where I got a Pentakyo actually. Just look up HellsDevil Lucian and look at my recent video where I explained to you how to play Lucian. Vayne as well feels very strong, just like Jinx, but Vayne cannot carry as well as a Jinx. Jinx is much better at carrying because like she does so much more damage, but Vayne is also like really strong, especially with an Enchanter as well. The beauty about Vayne is she destroys front lines better than Jinx. So if you're up against a tankier composition, Vayne is really good. And in the S tier, S plus tier, we got Draven. His buff is quite substantial as well. His passive gives him more gold. Instead of giving you 50 gold plus 4 per stack, it now gives you 80 gold plus 4 per stack. So every time you get a kill, you'll get 30 more gold than the old Draven. So, you know, that's a decent amount of gold. They also reduced the cooldown of his second ability, which is great, so you can spam it more often. Draven feels very strong right now, but you gotta have a good support with you. Like, if your support is not good, Draven feels kinda... Draven feels kinda weak if your support is not good. Next up is actually Xayah. She got a buff. She feels okay. What am I supposed to say? Like, she skills very well into the late game, and your ultimate is very good, because if the enemy tries to catch you out, your ultimate can save your ass so well. Like, there's no ADC that can do that, except for Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa's ultimate is also good for escaping stuff, but Xayah has the best one. Like, if Camille tries to hextech ultimatum you, for example, you just dodge it with your ultimate, right? Next up we got Varus, and Varus is insanely powerful as well. Like, regardless of the Storm Razor meta and lethal tempo, standard Varus is still super powerful. You just go Airy, and you go for Mana Immune and Lethality, and his arrows do so much damage. You gotta know how to play him though. Again, I have a million Varus videos. I recommend you to watch the recent ones especially, because like, I actually got really good at Varus as well for the recent Varus videos. Like, the first Varus videos I made were perhaps a bit questionable, but for the recent ones, I had actually talked with a lot of Varus players, and they told me how to play him properly. So if you ever thought like, I want to try Varus, but it never works for me. Because like, if you play Varus with just shooting your arrows, it doesn't work. You gotta know how his passive works. Again, you know, I explain all of that in my Varus videos, in my recent ones, so check it out. Next up is Ashe. Ashe feels super strong as well, with the lethal tempo, with the right build. Have I made an Ashe video already? I haven't! Well, I have, but not with a lethal tempo, right? Oh my god, I think I haven't. I need to make an Ashe video for you guys, because I played a lot of Ashe and she's insane. Her ultimate is really good as well. In the late game, the ultimate cooldown is what? Like 25 seconds? 20 seconds even? And then her damage in the late game, the slowing is just so good. You can catch out enemies so easily. Kai'Sa is really powerful too, especially that ultimate. Like, if there's an assassin diving you as a Kai'Sa can just very easily survive with your ultimate. And in 1v1s, you'll beat any assassin. There's no assassin that can beat you in 1v1s, because your ultimate, your passive, your first ability does so much damage in an isolated fight. Next up we got Ezreal. His wave clear is really not that good, but he still feels very strong with the Trinity Force. They buffed him recently, like a few months ago, the first ability. He just feels decent, right? Like, he just feels decent. There's a lot of ADCs above him, but he still feels very good. Like late game, he can carry games very well. Tristana got buffed, and she does more damage in the late game now. She feels strong. She feels quite hard to play. Like, it's really hard to make Tristana work. But if you're a really good Tristana player, she's insanely powerful. I put him in the bottom of the S tier because, as I said, it's really hard to play Tristana. Next up, we got Veigar. And Veigar also made it in the Dragon Lane tiers. Yet again, top of the A tier. For me, he's S tier, but I don't want to be biased. I put him in the top of the A tier because a lot of people don't know how to play him. But if you know how to play him, like, S tier. Not as... I mean... It's hard. S plus tier is a bit hard to say. No, he's S tier. He's just, in my opinion, he's S tier, but I put him on top of the A tier because no one knows how to play him. Next up, we got Senna and Nasus. I'm essentially just talking about the Senna-Nasus combo. It's A tier, in my opinion, in duo queue, sorry. Not in solo. Well, this is a solo queue tier list, but I still wanted to put it there because you can't really play it in solo queue, Senna-Nasus, because you can't rely on the other guy to pick the right champion. But when you're playing duo queue, Senna-Nasus is very good. You win every lane, basically. So that's the good thing about it. But you gotta be good at Nasus. Like, playing Nasus this way is not easy. You gotta be able to play AP Nasus and tank when you need to tank. Senna has to be able to play Senna properly, but it is very, very solid. And the other one that I want to talk about is my boy Jhin. He kinda sucks in this current meta. Sure, they buffed him recently, but he just doesn't fit the meta very well. He just, like, Jinx just does so much more than Jhin. Lucian does so much more, so it just doesn't work, unfortunately. And next up, Orianna and Ziggs. They just do Orianna and Ziggs stuff. Play it safe and carry the late game. Like, that's the thing with these champions. Next up, we got support. The top of the support list is still your girls, Yuumi and Karma. I mean, Yuumi, she got nerfed, but she actually... Like this? Yeah. In solo queue like this. Yuumi is still broken, but Karma would be better because in solo queue it's better. You can adapt your build. Like, if your team is trash, you can also just go for Luden's Echo and Rabadon's Deathcap and carry the game yourself. And as a Yuumi, if your team is absolutely trash, it's a bit hard because, you are buffing your teammates. So if all of them are trash, it's gonna be a bit hard to win the game. But it is fine. She's still S plus tier for sure. Like, Nami is also kinda S plus tier, but I just feel Karma and Yuumi are still stronger than Nami. I'll put a star next to her, but okay, Nami is S tier. So Nami, like, in solo queue is crazy. Even if your team sucks, you can just carry the game yourself with Nami. That's how strong she is. And if your team is good, Nami amplifies it even more. Because her abilities buff her teammates. It gives movement speed to all of her teammates as well. Just overall, way too good of a champion. I feel Nami needs to get nerfed. Like, it's really, really strong. Lulu, same story as Yuumi. You're buffing your team, but Lulu doesn't do it as well as Yuumi. Yuumi does a much better job. But Lulu is like a very good anti-assassin champion. Because your ultimate, your third ability, if an assassin dives your ADC, for example, you can just use your ultimate to knock up the enemy. And your third ability to give a shield. And the assassin is just never going to kill your squishy ADC. So that's the beauty about Lulu. Next up is Rakan, who's a very nice proactive champion. You can dive like crazy. And you can make some crazy plays with this champion. That's what makes him so good. And he's very good at doing it. You can go full AP Rakan. You can go for a tank Rakan. You can go for whatever your team needs. Like, very flexible champion. Next up is Thresh, who's also a very good proactive champion. But it's very hard to play. You gotta be able to hit your hooks. But if you can hit your hooks, definitely S tier champion. Like, he's very strong in the lane. And he's very strong at catching out enemy champions. And he's also very strong at teamfights. Because he's very tanky. And his abilities work very well in teamfights. Like his ultimate, for example, is such a good teamfighting ability. Next up, we got Alistar. And Alistar is super nice as well. Because, like, Alistar's turret diving is unrivaled. Like, you can gank a lane with an Alistar so easily. As long as you just have the balls to turret dive. That's all you have to do with Alistar. Just turret dive, use your ultimate, and tank the turret for like 10 seconds for free. And you get free kills. That's the beauty about Alistar. Also in teamfights, like, Alistar can always initiate teamfights. Use your ultimate and tank up everything. Next up, we got Sona, and Sona still feels incredibly powerful. They nerfed her healing, but they buffed the barrier that her second ability gives, so she still feels insanely powerful. Like, her passive, which is basically an exhaust to an enemy, when you use your second ability and then basic attack an enemy, you can permanently exhaust an enemy. Like, what I mean is, like, you can permanently reduce the damage of an enemy. And if the enemies, if the enemy composition only have one person that's hard carrying the game, for example, Katarina, all you have to do is just constantly focus the Katarina with your exhaust passive, and she's gonna deal so little damage. And that's the beauty about Sona. Meanwhile, you're constantly healing up your team, right? I've already talked about Senna. Next up is Janna, who's in my opinion a very underrated support because her shield is very good. The bonus AD she provides is quite a lot. Like when you're buffing AD champions, the buff is really big because you're giving them a massive shield and also a massive damage buff. So it's a thing that's quite underrated. Her tornado is also very strong. Her ultimate is very strong. If the enemy has like a Ziggs and stuff like that, Janna's ultimate is very powerful because it can heal up the entire team from all the poking that they took from Ziggs, right? So if you're up against that kind of composition or against a Varus, for example, Janna works very, very well. Braum, you know, doesn't feel like an S tier champion anymore. It just feels like the enchanters just destroy Braum in lane. You know, when you play Nami, Braum is supposed to win against Nami because of his shield. It's very good. But Nami can still destroy Braum in the lane. Lulu destroys Braum in the lane. You know, all these champions just do very well into Braum in the lane. Like, you just can't do much. But sure, during teamfight he's good. Sure, against all of these melee champions he's good because he can apply his passive. But in the lane, he's just not that powerful. Next one that I want to talk about is Blitzcrank. They buffed Blitzcrank, but he just doesn't feel strong. It's like, you miss your hook, you're useless. That's the thing about Blitzcrank. So, yeah, it's just a bit of an awkward champion, I should say. But he can still be good. If you're able to hit hooks, he can be a make it or break it champion in the late game. When you're losing and you just hook the most valuable champion and kill him, that could be a victory. I really have to go to the bathroom, so I want to end this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. And yeah, wait, let me go to this one. I'll see you all in the next Wild Rift video. Bye bye.